The president's Supreme Court nominee is facing another allegation of sexual misconduct. Judge Brett Kavanaugh denies this new allegation like the last one, and here's what the Senate Judiciary Committee will be looking at as it prepares for his first hearing, which as of now is scheduled for Thursday, about the first allegation. Christine Blasey Ford's allegation was made public a little over a week ago when reporting about a confidential letter she sent to ranking member Dianne Feinstein surfaced through an intermediary. Ford is uncertain about several details of her allegation, including when it happened, though she said she believed it occurred in 1982. Ford says that they were in a suburban Maryland home when a highly inebriated Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge pushed her into a bedroom, locked the door, and turned up the music. She says Kavanaugh pinned her on the bed and tried to take off her clothes, allegedly covering her mouth when she tried to yell for help. Kavanaugh categorically denies Ford's accusation. Mark Judge also denied the allegation, and I want to play an interesting moment from his confirmation hearing from Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing when Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono asked him this.
Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
Now, even if Ford's allegation is true, Kavanaugh wasn't being untruthful there. He was 17 years old at the time of that allegation. But the new allegation, the new accusation, is alleged to have happened when the judge was a legal adult. Over the weekend, the New Yorker released a story about Deborah Ramirez, a classmate of Kavanaugh's at Yale. Now, Ramirez's allegation occurred in their freshman year at the university when both were at a dorm party. We want to warn you, by the way, this story is graphic. Ramirez, who acknowledges she was drunk at the time and has gaps in her memory, claims that Kavanaugh, also intoxicated, pulled down his pants and exposed himself to her. He then allegedly put his genitals in her face. She accidentally touched them when she pushed him away, something she says she did not want to do. Kavanaugh also denies the allegation. Steph?
This is complicated. Joining us live now, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Mimi Rocca, and former prosecutor Doug Wigdor. He now represents survivors of sexual harassment and assault. Doug, clearly we've got a new accusation here in Ms. Ramirez. What's the weight? What's the bar in which this gets taken seriously, this gets investigated? Because when we heard from Dr. Ford, Chuck Grassley and other members of the Judiciary Committee said, we want to hear more. Please come testify.
Well, they need to hear more, and I think the statistics that you put up before the break are so important because there are so many women who are what we call silent sufferers,
right.
Women who don't come forward, and that is a fact. So to attack women because they haven't come forward and say that they are doing this for politics really isn't giving them the time of day that I think everyone, all of the American public really want to.
But there has to be some measure that X amount qualifies and below doesn't.
Well,
no?
I mean, it's not a trial, right? So we're not in a criminal trial, so It's certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt. We're not in a civil trial, so it's not a preponderance of the evidence. My personal view is that this is a Supreme Court nomination for life. This is basically somebody applying for a job. And, you know, CEOs of publicly traded companies get asked to leave or don't get jobs for far less than this. So if the testimony of Dr. Ford and or Ms. Ramirez is credible, if people get a sense that something bad happened, then they should find another candidate for the Supreme Court. Now, of course, these things need to be somewhat substantiated, and that's what the hearings, that's what the investigation hopefully will show, and we'll see how it all unfolds, if it unfolds. Thursday, you know, I said last week.
You said last week. I
said last week that Monday, today, wouldn't happen. It hasn't happened, and Thursday's a long ways away. So every time you hit refresh on your browser, something new comes up. I don't know Thursday's going to happen.
Mimi, let me ask you this. There are the statistics about why women don't come forward, and there are reasons why there are statutes of limitations and evidentiary problems and people's memories fail and things like that. But this became strangely political a few days ago, not for the reasons that some of the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee talk about, but the president coming out saying, this happened 36 years ago. If it was really as serious as they said, why didn't her loving parents, meaning Christine Blasey Ford's loving parents, reported the police? We and everybody with a phone and a Google has evidence as to why these things don't happen, right? That even when when sexual assaults are reported, they are often mishandled, they are often not taken seriously, and community pressure on a woman is very strong not to come forward.
Exactly, Allie. You know, the president could have responded in so many different ways, and the way that he chose to respond, though, really, I think, shows, you know, it brings into focus why this has become such a galvanizing moment for so many women. Because instead of saying, well, let's see how this plays out, he basically said, I don't believe her because she didn't report it back then in the 1980s, you know, when really this was taken even less seriously. And, you know, it really couldn't have been that bad. And that's just so offensive to, I think, so many women, people in general, some of whom are themselves victims. And even if you're not, you just understand that this is Trump and, frankly, so many of the Republican men in power right now trying to shame and bully these women who are coming forward. And, you know, I think the point is that, as you say, as Steph pointed out in her statistics, as Doug was just saying, there are about, you know, dozens of reasons why these don't get reported. They are often not taken seriously. And again, some of these did occur a long time ago, which presents its own challenges, but they were taken even less seriously back then.
Yeah. But what are the proportions of false reports versus legitimate ones? Because oftentimes you hear defenders of men who are accused saying, don't just listen to these women. What if it was your son? What if it was your brother? What if it was your father? And they paint a picture as though it's a one-for-one. For every man who's accused and deserves to be, there's another man who's wrongfully accused. Those numbers do not add up.
I mean, there's no question that there are people who are wrongfully accused. I mean, that's unfortunate because
but there are far less.
That's what I was just going to say. There are significantly less, in my experience, dealing with these sorts of cases where there's far less. Now, there might be cases where the prosecution doesn't believe it can prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, so they don't prosecute the case, like when I represented the maid in the Dominique Strauss-Kahn case. I think everyone today would agree that she was sexually assaulted, and in the civil case, we were able to resolve that. But to say that somebody was wrongfully accused, I think those cases are very few and far in between. And one point about whether or not people came out and said something, I mean, I think it's important to remember that Dr. Ford apparently told her doctor in 2012 about this, and so that was before the political sort of Supreme Court nomination. And according to the New Yorker piece, Ms. Ramirez apparently told her sister and her mother, although she didn't identify the name, which sounds, in my view, credible. Like, why would you mention the person's name to your mother and your sister when they don't know who the person is? And
yeah, but in the last week, but in the New Yorker piece, in the last week, she was trying to get her sort of memory straight and wasn't sure if it was definitely Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, you know, I don't know what the back and forth between the authors of that article, but let me say this. It is not uncommon for people to suppress certain events, especially very traumatic events, and then to go through a process by which they begin to remember things. Obviously, that can be full of problems when you're dealing with someone who is young and impressionable, and people are given ideas and thoughts about facts that might not have happened. We've seen that happen with younger children. But this is a woman who went to Yale. She's obviously highly educated. And I think that process is something that happens all the time to sexual assault survivors.
All right, Doug, thanks very much. Doug Wigdor, Mimi Rocah, thanks to both of you.